All right, today we're going to talk about assignments because I've got a lot of questions in our school group about how this actually works in practice. And I'm going to take you through the purchase agreement, the assignment agreement, and then ultimately the HUD, because all three of these are important. So let's start with the purchase agreement. This version's a little outdated. This isn't what we use, but the point remains of you gotta have your name or entity and or assignees as the buyer. Talk to your title company or attorney to make sure that you have all the verbiage that they need, that they're comfortable with doing this. But for us, that includes under seller acknowledgement. Seller agrees buyer may market this contract for sale to another buyer and assign all interest. Buyer has equitable interest in the property and may market the property on the MLS. That part is very state and realtor specific. Talk to your attorney and realtor ahead of time about marketing on the MLS, but the assignment language is fairly universal, barring the states that don't let you do assignments anymore. And this is what our title company wants us to have in order to do assignments. So that's what we put in to make the initial contract assignable. So, all right, great. You did that correctly. You have a property under contract. How do you actually assign it? Well, in practice, all you're doing is for a fee, allowing another buyer to remove your name as purchaser and put their name as the buyer, right? And they pay you a fee, an assignment fee, to do just that. So here's the assignment contract. This is a small deal from the end of last year. This guy had two lots. He wouldn't let us buy one. We didn't really want this one. It wasn't a great deal, so we just did a small assignment on this one just to get the other property. All right. So agreement is between us, assignor, and then this was the company that was the assignee, the end buyer. This is who we were buying from. Again, this is all public data. It's Florida, so you can look this up. And then this was the property, legal description. All right. Coming down further, we don't need to read through all this out loud, but essentially it's saying that I am assigning to this buyer the right to purchase the property for a fee. This was the title company we were using. This is the deposit they're putting up, and this was the fee. Now, how do you figure out the fee based on closing costs, realtor fees, if there's realtors involved? Well, the purchase price was 40. Assignment fee, and I worked backwards to get to this, 4650, because the agent commission was 2850. Now, they offered, right, this LKS Homes offered 47,500. We had it under contract at 40. So, of course, minus the deposit, that's 46,500. And then 47,500 times 6% is 2850, which leaves 4650 as our assignment fee. Now, one thing that caused confusion early on before I knew what I was doing here is we promised that seller we'd pay all closing costs, right? That's pretty typical. But that end buyer who agreed to buy it at 47,500, that's not typical to pay all closing costs. Typically, you pay your side of the transaction unless that's explicitly negotiated, which it was not. So, I put this little asterisk for the title company. Closing costs assignor is responsible for, i.e., us, will be taken out of the assignment fee. So a few $100 were taken out of this. Total due at closing by the assignee, that end buyer. Same caveat here. Closing costs assignee is responsible, will be added by the title company. So that has solved that problem because when you're doing this assignment, you don't know exactly what those closing costs are going to be, and it can make it difficult to work backwards and get exact numbers. So putting this little asterisk in has been the solution. Here you put in the closing date, which, man, this was incorrect. So I wonder, might have submitted this incorrectly, or I'm not sure. Maybe the title company didn't even notice, but that was very incorrect. And then there's some more caveats, not contact the seller, so on and so forth. You sign it, they sign it, and you submit this to the title company. The title company will update the title commitment to reflect the new buyer, and at closing day, you'll get a HUD. Now, unfortunately, this title company was really incompetent. They still put 4650 on here, even though this was not correct. There were fees taken out of this. Now, that's another story, irrelevant to the overarching picture or conversation, but your assignment fee goes as an expense on the buyer's side, right? So there was their total with, or excuse me, due from borrower. Yeah, there was their total with closing costs, right? So that's how assignments actually work in practice. That's the contract you have to fill out, and then this is how it looks on the HUD. Now, important to understand, in a lot of states, and more so it's dependent on the title company or attorney, and especially in attorney states, that original seller is going to see your assignment fee if they look at the buyer side. They're also going to see a different name as buyer. Not problematic if you're upfront with the seller. He knew exactly what we were doing, didn't care at all. He had his price. As long as he got his price, that's fine. And so keep that in mind. Some companies will allow you to do one-sided HUDs where the seller only sees their side and the buyer only sees their side. But even then, your buyer is going to see your assignment fee. So if it's huge, keep that in mind. It may be worth or it may be worth double closing so that they don't see it. If it's someone you don't know, if it's someone who potentially is emotional and might be offended by it, that's something to keep in mind. But both buyer and seller see this full HUD. Again, you can ask for separate HUDs, but your end buyer is still going to see your assignment fee both here and here. So that's what it looks like on the HUD. It's just a simple line item as a debit to the buyer. So that's how assignments work. Very, very simple in practice, and the complexity and skill comes around negotiating with the seller, setting expectations, and doing the same with the end buyer, and managing the emotions and expectations of each.